Welcome to the Spirit of Watercolor. Let's talk about paper so that you can have good luck with your watercolor paper. So many times people get frustrated with the buckling of watercolor paper, and there's some things that can help you so you don't have those issues. Knowing ahead of time, I think, is the best way. And still sometimes problems will arise, but this will help us to avoid some of those. First of all, there's different kinds of paper, and they'll respond differently to the paint and how much water you use. If you really want to get into the free and easy natural watercolor with wet-on-wets, you need to know these kinds of things. So, first of all, let's talk about the kinds of papers you can get. You can get watercolor paper in student grade papers up to professional expensive papers. And also the weight of the paper makes a difference in the way that it responds to the paint as well. So watercolor paper comes in 3 kinds of weight. Let's start with that. And well, there's more in between, but generally it's 90 pound, which is quite thin, and then there's 140 pound, which is sort of the middle of the road. And then there's 300 pound, which is a heavy, thick, almost cardboard-like watercolor paper, okay? And the other thing about watercolor paper is it comes in pads and sheets and roll, you can buy huge rolls too and cut it up. But usually people order from the pads or blocks, which I didn't mention, but also blocks, and then the sheets. Here's like a pad of watercolor paper. This is a Kilimanjaro, which is a pretty good professional brand, 100% cotton paper. And then this is more of a student grade paper. This one's Artist Loft, I believe. You can get these at the craft store. More of a lesser quality, but it still works pretty well. Okay, and then you can order to really large pads, which this may or may not show on the video, but this is a 18 by 24, and this is a very large pad of watercolor paper. This one's Fabriano. It's another really nice watercolor brand. Okay, and then let's also look at a sheet of watercolor paper, and really all I have right now is just a big painting, I guess. I can show you. Most of my sheets are gone. I need to buy some more. But this here is a thick one, so this is a 300 pound, and it's quite thick, as you can see. And this will take a lot of water. You don't have to even worry about the painting buckling, really. It might bend a little, but it's not going to buckle much. So, but those are very expensive. So we will talk about stretching paper in another video. There's probably a lot of YouTube videos about stretching paper, and people do it slightly different ways, and there's a lot of it depends on, what kind of papers you're using and so on and so forth. Everyone has a little different way, but there's a basic way to do that, to create a stretched out paper so that the paper doesn't buckle when it's that large, okay? Now, watercolor paper, when it's small like this, around 140 pound, I usually get. The 90 is quite thin, and that does tend to buckle. But this 140 pound paper usually does pretty well if it's in this 9 by 12, 11 by 14, 12 by 16. Those sizes of watercolor paper don't tend to buckle very much unless you get them soaked, with water, which, you can stretch the small sheets too. Just saying, if you think you're going to get that wet and have problems. But usually I don't have problems with paper buckling unless it gets really large. That's when it starts to do that. Okay, so the next thing we should talk about with paper is the fact that there's different kinds of texture to the paper, the toothiness of it, bumpiness. So I guess again there's the middle of the road watercolor paper, which would be the cold press, which has a little bit of tooth, and this varies from brand to brand a little bit, but it's basically got a bit of a bumpiness, a little bit of texture, but you can still get pretty detailed on the paper. Now the hot press I rarely use. Some people really like it. It's completely smooth. Smooth. You can get super detailed if you're more into detailed work. with your paints. And watercolor, you can get as loose or as tight and detailed as you want. This is your, you know, creative way, whatever that is your style, and you'll find that as you move along in your work. And it might be influenced by other mediums that you've used too. Okay, so now let's see, then the other paper, so we have the cold press, we have the hot press, and then there's rough paper. And I do have, I think, I don't know if this pad's rough or cold press. This one is the cold, this is the rough right here. And this, oops, this one is stuck. But this paper's really got a real toothiness, a real bumpiness to it. I don't know if you can see that or not, but I'll try to get it close to the camera. But it's going to not take detail as much. It's going to have, I want to say, I call it sort of an impressionistic look to it when you paint with it. And that's something that is sometimes preferred on particular paintings that I do, or that some artists, mainly that's how their style is and that's what they like to use. So there's these main things: the weight of the paper, the tooth or the texture of the paper, then the size. And so those are factors that you want to take into consideration. When you're starting to paint, you want to think about what kind of paper you think will create the most success for you, because some people feel like they just want to start on student grade in case they don't like the watercolor painting medium, you know. But of course, if you just choose that, you may find that you're not succeeding as well. When I started with my watercolor class, I was struggling with the paper, and I didn't know it at first. But my instructor said, try some different companies, different brands of paper. Arches is very popular, Fabriano. Some of these are good papers. You can take a large sheet or two or a pad, and you can cut the sheet smaller, but the quality of the paper is going to make a difference in the results you get when you paint. I can't stress this enough, because it made all the difference in my work, from almost dropping this class of watercolor to moving on and having a passion for watercolor. So I can't stress this enough, that these kinds of things make a huge difference in your end product when you paint. So I would take each part of, you know, the supplies, materials and supplies, and really focus in on, you know, getting the best quality you can afford. Now, the watercolor papers that I've used from a sampler pack that I've ordered from like Cheap Joe's Art Stuff has helped me a lot to try. You can buy a pack and it's got different kinds of papers, maybe two or three or four different companies in the pack. It's like a 10-pack or 12-pack of paper. And then it has the different weights of the paper of that particular brand, like maybe Strathmore, you can get a 80-pound, I know they make an 80-pound, they're rare, but and then maybe 140, you know, and then there's some other brands where you might find a 200 or 300 pound, and you can see if you like that. And you can find certain papers that work with, like I say, your style, or what results that you like by playing with the different papers. And these sampler packs are nice because you don't commit to like a huge pad and then you don't like it. So those are really a good tip to try as well. Okay, so that's really it. I just wanted to look at watercolor paper because it makes so much of a difference in our painting. So I realized when I was doing materials and supply video for you that I need to kind of break this down into the different parts. We're going to talk about brushes and play with the different brushes and see what they do. It'll be a mixture of talking about the kinds of brushes and some demonstrations for you to practice of using those brushes and seeing what different things the different brushes do. And then there's also going to be, I'll make another video for you about the palette and how to load your palette well and organize it so you don't have to constantly try to figure out where the color of paint is you're looking for. But this video here was just really to just kind of break down the papers, because I almost forgot that you know, is one of the materials and supplies that can make a huge difference in the results of your work. So I'm just so happy again to be here with you and talk to you about watercolor. Everything I do with watercolor just makes me happy, and it's all about creativity. It's all about the fact that I'm myself, trying to keep myself going with painting because I love it and it changes my life and makes my life better. And I really want you to be able to feel that way as well. If you are trying to do something that, you know, puts you in a state of happiness and joy and creativity and, you know, a place where you can just escape the troubles of the world, as I've said before, this is the way to do it. So keep coming back. Let's keep on going and talk about all our different materials and the upcoming demonstrations of things to help you to kind of find your voice with this medium and to find how it can work for you. Thank you so much. Again, as I always say, click on the like button if you like what you're seeing, and you can subscribe because, you know, this will motivate me to keep on making these videos, and we'll make 1 or 2 a week, and we'll get together and we'll enjoy the joy of this beautiful watercolor medium. So keep coming back to the spirit of watercolor. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.